Okay guys, so this is part 2 to my whole pregnancy and labor and delivery story and all that stuff. So if you guys haven't seen my pregnancy video, go watch that shit. Like it, subscribe to my channel, all that stuff. Okay, so carrying on, like I said, this is part 2. So when they did decide to induce me, which was on September 14th on a Friday at 1, obviously in September. His original due date was the 24th, so they didn't even freaking induce me. You know, I was full term pretty much. But so when they did induce me, I went in and they weren't gonna keep me. They weren't gonna keep me again because I wasn't where I needed to be with my preeclampsia, and I was just like, the whole thing is shit. It's bad. Just keep me. So the doctor that was gonna deliver my son wasn't gonna keep me, so he called my OBGYN. Who was the one who was concerned about me pretty much with the sickness that I had at that point. And she had monitored me that day early in the morning, because like I said, I had a normal doctor's visit that morning, and she sent me to the hospital because she was like, you know what, this doesn't seem right, let's go ahead and send you, and hopefully this time we'll get a baby out of it. And I was like, yeah, right. But so I was there, I was already in the gown, whatever, all that shit. So he called my doctor and she was like, you need to keep her, pretty much. And he was like, okay. So he talked to me and he was like, so my son scared me. He was like, so it looks like you're not getting any better. And I was like, no shit, like, duh. Reasons why I was sent here for the 5th time. And he was like, so we're gonna go ahead and start the induction. And I was like, great, okay. So I was there and you know, getting situated. So you know how they usually will prick you to give you an IV because you're going into labor, you're losing fluids, all that stuff. I had been poked like 4 times by like 12 different nurses because I was so swollen that they couldn't find my veins. So that was super, IVs hurt. The needles are big. And I had been poked once on my hand right here, 2 times on my wrist, and 2 times on my right here, which is not a very good place because you bend your arm, you know what I mean? And then here you bend your wrist. Anyways, they just couldn't do it. So they had to bring an anesthesiologist because I was so swollen they couldn't find my veins, and he brought an ultrasound like machine to find my vein because I was so fucking swollen. Guys, I had gained 80 pounds during this process towards the end of my pregnancy. You know how horrible that is? My body was under so much stress that it literally was like dying pretty much. Anyways, so they finally got the IV in, and they had done testing before that just to see where my blood was. My protein levels were so high. Anyway, which is a part of preeclampsia. And so they kept me, and they said the first steps of the induction, since obviously you're being induced, you're not going into natural labor, they need to start the process. So they put, I forgot what it was called, but this medicine that they put on the cervix, to where it ripens it. It makes it pretty much soft so the baby can move his way down, and it's a process so it can, you know, be easier for him. And they did that like 4 different times, and let me tell you, it didn't work. None of it, that did not work. And they had been doing that for like a good solid, like good amount of hours. And so they were just like, this isn't working. It literally was like hours upon hours. And I was like, oh, you know, like this, yeah, it's not working. Like, I was only dilated to a centimeter. It didn't seem like it was gonna work. So after that didn't work, they said the next step would be that, because this is hours later, like I said, to put a balloon inside my cervix, and they were gonna fill it up, and that would dilate me to like 4.5 centimeters, and it would just fall out naturally. So after hours and hours, they finally, you know, it wasn't getting me anywhere. So they just continued over time to give me the medicine on my cervix, and obviously it didn't work. So around Saturday around noon, my water broke. So I was getting there gradually, but just not in a good amount of time. Because like I said, I went in at 1 on Friday, and this was Saturday. My water broke at noon, barely. And they told me with the medicine, obviously I wouldn't be able to go bathroom because it would like slip out, or I would pee it out or something like that, even though it was on my cervix. And so they wouldn't let me go bathroom. And when finally we were done with that, I was just like, I have to go to the bathroom, because you had to wait like 2 hours for it to be finished with, or you can go back up and go to the bathroom. So my water broke, and the way I knew is because I was gonna go to the bathroom, because the hours had been up to where I could go. And I got up, and it was like green almost, and obviously that's bad. But I didn't know that till later. And I was like, I talked to the nurse, I was like, my water broke, and I think it broke, if you want to go ahead and look at it. And she was like, no, I don't want to see that, like, I've seen it before. And I was just like, okay, even though you're the fucking nurse, bro, like, you know, you're supposed to see that shit. Anyways, I went to the bathroom, and obviously hours by, no dilating. So by that evening, they put in the balloon in my cervix to dilate me to 4.5 centimeters. And they gave me fentanyl, because apparently it was a painful process. And they gave me the fentanyl, and it made me feel whack as fuck, guys. Like, I was drunk, practically. While my baby was asleep. Anyways, I was drunk, and they put it in. Even that, it fucking was so uncomfortable. Like, it was painful. And, so one balloon goes in the cervix, and then one balloon goes in the vagina. And, it was so it pretty much manually dilates you. So from being at 1.5 centimeters from the cervix dilating, you know, from the medicine, to 4.5 centimeters, it was fucking painful. And that's when my contractions started kicking in. Like, they hurt so fucking bad, dude. And I was like, no. So we were still convinced I was gonna have a vaginal delivery at this point, like natural. And I didn't want the epidural and anything like that. So I was waiting it out, you know. And at this point, they were getting so bad. They hurt, and they were just like, you know, like, because what they told me at the beginning of my pregnancy, or not the beginning of my pregnancy, the beginning of the delivery, was that it would be recommended if I got the epidural, because of the stress that the baby was already under with the preeclampsia. And I was just like, let me just, you know, wait it out and see how it goes. Hopefully he'll come soon, because of the process of, you know, of the induction. And they're just like, okay. And so they pretty much were leaning me towards getting the epidural, and I was just like, you know, let's take it easy, which, you know, whatever. But so the time comes, the contractions are fucking hurting me, I'm like dying, I'm like crying, all my friends are in the fucking room, I have like 20 people in my room at this point, and I'm just like, shit, you know, like, oh fuck. So everyone left, which was, you know, gave me time to relax. And like 2 hours later, I was just like, I want the epidural. Like, I need the epidural, you know, because it had been so long that my water broke, and from noon to like late that evening, when the contractions were killing me already. So they were just like, okay. So they came in and they gave me the epidural, and the epidural wasn't put in right. So I could still feel the pain. And obviously it's supposed to like it's supposed to take the edge off and like kind of make it numb, but like still give you like feel pressure. But the thing is, it's not even that fact that I felt the contractions, it's the fact that I had fucking literally, the anesthesiologist said I had like 400 something percent or something like that of pressure in my back when they decided to take it out, because they had to redo it. So they gave me the epidural twice. They put it in twice. Because the first time it wasn't put in right. Every time I would turn, so at that point it was the next day, and my two sisters, my best friend, and obviously Juan, my boyfriend, were in the room, and they were going to be there for the delivery. And you know, I was in excruciating pain. They had to put oxygen on me because I was having a panic attack because I was in so much pain. It wasn't even like back labor, it was at the top of my back. I couldn't turn my head without, like, my bones, like, it felt like they were cracking, like they were breaking. And I was having a panic attack, and like the nurses came in and they're just like, okay, we're gonna see if you can wait it out a little bit longer. And I was like, bitch, fucking fix it now, you know, like I was like, it fucking hurts. So they called the anesthesiologist. They took it out and they put it back in, and that's when they told me that it was put in wrong, pretty much. And so they put it in again, and this time I felt so much better. Like, obviously I still had like the pain and the tension from the first time that they put it in. So they put it in the second time, and I felt so much better. I still was in a lot of pain because of it, but it wasn't as bad. So, you know, the next day, it was obviously Sunday now, and they were just like, okay, so your contractions are starting to get farther apart and the baby's heart rate is dropping. And I was like, great, what do we do? Like, I was even asking them on Saturday, I was like, so are we like considering an emergency C-section if it doesn't go to plan? And they were just like, let's just see how it goes, because I guess that the doctor was very conservative and wanted me to have a vaginal delivery as much as I possibly could, like push me in that direction. And I was just like, okay. So on Sunday, it was around like 3 o'clock, and they were telling me, they're like, so all the stuff about the baby's heart rate and then my contractions, and at 3, I was only dilated to a 6. So all the way from Friday all the way to Sunday, the day is almost over, I'm only dilated to a 6 after everything that they're doing. My water broke on Saturday at noon. My child had been pretty much in no fluid, no amniotic fluid. Like, he was pretty much dying, you know? And they still were barely talking about getting an emergency C-section. And I literally was like wanting them. I was like, just get my son out of me. Come on, like, this is bad. We were all panicking, we were all freaked out, and you know, so 3:45 came around, and they were just like, so yeah, we definitely need to do the emergency C-section. This isn't good, pretty much. So they, you know, told Juan to get ready, put him in the suit, the cap. They put me on the cap, or I put the cap on and everything like that. They wheeled me in. They gave me more medicine for the epidural. I was so fucked up on drugs at this point, guys. It was insane. Like, it literally was insane. So the emergency C-section is happening, and I can feel them literally slicing my stomach. Like, it wasn't like the pain, but I could feel them. Like, the way I could explain it about getting the C-section, I don't know if every C-section is like this, but it felt like, you know, when you get like you're cutting meat to make dinner, and you have like a big piece of pork, and you have like, imagine like a little knife, and you were just slicing by layer by layer. That's how I felt. They were the way that they were cutting me, pretty much. And I was crying, obviously. I was a fucking wreck, and Juan was recording the whole thing. And so when I had him, I didn't know that I had him like he was born, because he didn't come out crying. Like, he wasn't breathing, he wasn't crying, nothing. And I was like, you know, they finally took him to the table, and he didn't cry even when they were doing everything. So even in the video after I watched it, I was like, how's my son? And the nurse turned around, she was like, you know, we're just trying to figure everything out. And I seriously think it's because of the fact that he was in there for so fucking long. He had no amniotic fluid practically, and they waited all those hours to finally get him out of me, you know? So my son obviously was already under stress from the preeclampsia, and was in 10 times more stress because of the whole delivery. And that's why he didn't come out breathing, because they waited too fucking long. So I didn't get to see my son. I didn't get to hold my son when he was born. They took us in separate rooms. They took me to recovery. And that shit is so insane, guys. I don't know if, like, I felt like I was dying because I was on so much drugs. The way I can explain it is, when I was in the room, like, I was so relaxed on the drugs, like the stuff that they had given me, I would stop breathing, and I could like feel myself stop breathing. And obviously I was so relaxed, I couldn't do anything about it. The nurse kept being like, breathe, Pam, breathe. And because I would stop breathing, and I did that on several occasions, and they're like, breathe, you need to breathe. And they obviously, like, I didn't even mention this, I was anemic in my pregnancy also, so that was another problem that I had, anemia. And during the C-section, I lost too much blood. So I lost a lot of blood. That was another concern. They took my son, my husband, that's what I call him, sorry. My boyfriend was with the baby and all that stuff. My sisters and stuff, they were still in the other room, and so they took me. I was recovering in the recovery room, and so they wheeled me into the room where I was staying. Like I don't know how you say it, like just where you stay for your next few days after your first child. You know, you stay like 3 days or 2 days if it's your first child. And obviously I had to stay longer because it was a C-section, and they had me on like Percocet or like the oxycodone and ibuprofen, and they had me on stool softeners, obviously because I was C-section. And oh my gosh, guys, when I started feeling how the C-section actually felt, it was so horrible. Like, obviously it's major surgery. They slice you open and they pull the baby out, all that stuff. And my incision is probably like about that big, and thank God they didn't put staples. If they didn't put staples, it was just like I forget what it's called, sutures. And they made me put on, like, they put the sheet down on the bed, and like those big giant pads, they're like diapers practically for after you have a baby. And I kept losing blood. Like, I filled those two, every mama will know what I'm talking about after they have the baby. The big pads, I soaked 2 of those in like fucking not even 20 minutes. So that was a big concern. And obviously I delivered him on Sunday. They took him immediately to the NICU. I wasn't able to see him until later on Sunday, like late in the evening. And they wheeled me to his room where he was staying in the NICU, and they had him laying on his stomach. They had a little plastic box around him, because obviously he had respiratory issues. Now, they said it was because he inhaled meconium, which is the baby's first poop, so it's like tar, it's black, it's sticky, it's not supposed to be inhaled at all. And he inhaled it, apparently, and so he was in a little box, plastic box, being filled with oxygen. And they were starting to hook on like a whole bunch of different stuff, like different tubes and stuff. So, you know, being a first-time mom and all the stuff, this all could have been prevented if they just did the C-section initially. But so being a first-time mom and seeing your child like that, it is such a painful experience. Obviously you're so in love with seeing them, and it did hurt, like, my heart, the fact that I couldn't hold him. It wasn't a normal experience, you know, like for any mother, you know, just I wasn't able to hold my son. We didn't do skin to skin, anything like that. They took him away from me right away. I didn't get to see him until hours later, so I didn't even know what condition he was in. So, you know, they had him in the box. They were telling me all the medical things, like the numbers on the because he had three little patches on his chest. One was monitoring his heart, one was managing his OT levels, which is his oxygen, and then his breathing rate. So seeing that freaked me the fuck out. I started crying. Like, I was such a wreck. Even just thinking about it makes me really sad. Because no one likes to see their child suffering, you know? And breathing, obviously, when you can't breathe, you fucking freak out. So my honey was just so in a different state. Imagine being a newborn and, like, you know, that's like the first thing you experience. It's so different. That's why I'm like, every time my child cries, I like immediately get him and like freak out. But so he wasn't breathing when he was born. They put him in the box. You know, days later, I was watching him, and his glucose levels were really low, so they had to put an IV on him. He obviously was breathing not good, so they put him on oxygen. He wasn't in the box anymore, but he had like the tubes and stuff like that. He had the patches on his foot. He had like little pull socks on, and he had a whole bunch of shit coming out of him. And then they had to do the feeding tube through his nose, and that went down into his stomach because he wasn't breathing, or he was breathing too fast. So eating normally, that's another thing that was like hard, because I wasn't able to do his first feeding. I wasn't able to breastfeed him until, who knows, you know, forever later. So I didn't get to do that either, because of the fact that he was breathing too fast, that he could choke and it could go into his lungs, which is already having issues. So they did the feeding tube, and he was just full of wires, and tubes, meaning, you know what I mean. So that was really hard. I would see him, you know, I would walk to the NICU, I would stay in the NICU for forever, and I wasn't making milk at this time, because obviously I was induced, my body wasn't ready for it. I didn't get to do skin to skin, which is like a sign for the body to start producing the milk. I wasn't with my son, so that was really hard. We weren't staying in the same room. You know how newborns stay in the room usually with the mother and the family, but he was down, you know, in a different room, in a different section from me. That was pretty tough. There was some hard stuff. And I just felt so empty at this point, because obviously he wasn't in my stomach anymore, but he was nowhere in sight for me. You know, I didn't get to see him. I didn't get to do all the stuff that, you know, normal moms get to do with their babies. So that was pretty heartbreaking. So due to the fact that I was anemic, I started not feeling very good. And the loss of blood during the C-section, I was starting to get sicker throughout the days. And they were just like, so your levels for I think your iron or whatever are dropping pretty significant. If they drop even lower, it looks like you're gonna need a blood transfusion. And I was like, fuck, dude, everything is so wrong right now. So, you know, guess, you know, they were checking to see if they were dropping, and we were optimistic, you know, hopefully they would get higher. Of course not, they did not. I ended up going to levels that were super dangerous. So I had to get a blood transfusion. So I was away from my son for a longer amount of time. I had to get a blood transfusion, and I was still recovering from the emergency C-section. So that was fucking annoying. In all reality, like, it was fucking dumb that, you know, not only was my body doing really horrible, but my child's body was suffering too. So and plus the fact that we couldn't be near each other to help our healing process. We were away from each other. I can only imagine how Juan felt during this whole process. My poor baby, my poor thing. So he was away. He would go see the baby when I wasn't able to, because of the fact that I was in so much pain. So after the blood transfusion, you know, I felt like a brand new person. Other than the fact that I was still recovering from the C-section. So they released us. I had him on Sunday, and they released us that Thursday at like 5, 6. So I was staying in the NICU with my son. I didn't leave I only left like 2 times when the entire time that he was in the NICU at the hospital, because of the fact that I had to go home and get more clothes. And the nurses in the NICU were amazing. They were so fucking amazing. They were so helpful. That's all I have to say. That they were just amazing. Like, I knew them by, like, obviously the first name I needed to, but they would sit in my room and we would talk, and we would talk about their families and how that, you know, this will be over with, and how one of the nurses had a kid that almost died during labor, and that he got sick and that they had to watch him, that it'll be all okay and stuff like that. And another thing was, during the process of him staying in the NICU, he had jaundice, which isn't, you know, most babies will get it, but he was staying in there, and the thing is, he kept having to move up in oxygen. So that was another painful process, but the nurses were awesome. Going on with the story, but okay, so I stayed in the NICU with him, and so the NICUs have their own private areas, like their rooms, and one was like a little chair that folded out into a bed, and a recliner. So that's all that Juan and I got to stay with, and thank God Juan was there. He took 2 weeks off of work, you know, to be with me and the baby, which was amazing. I love that guy so much. Thank God for him. But we stayed in the NICU, and during the stay in the NICU, he kept getting worse, and they weren't understanding why, because they cleared the meconium. It would just take a little bit for him to get better, you know, but they thought they would do the x-rays on his chest because they kept having to move him up in oxygen, and he moved from the wall oxygen to a little like a cart oxygen, because of the fact that they, once after a certain point, oxygen gets cold and it will like freeze their lungs pretty much, so they have to warm it up before it goes into the body. And that's what they had to do with him. And at this point, they, like I said, he had jaundice, so they had to put him in an incubator. So my child was just had so much stuff going on: feeding tube, oxygen, car, obviously, IV, the pulse ox, the chest things, the fucking incubator, everything. Like, my poor kid, dude. And at this point, I was starting to have issues with the C-section complications. You'd think that I'd be so much better after the blood transfusion, but that was bad. That wasn't, like, it didn't help, or it helped, but it didn't help with the C-section now. But after, you know, a few days of hanging out and like seeing if he was gonna get better and stuff, they did the x-rays on his chest, and they came out hazy, and they were like wondering why. So they did the cardiogram, something like that does an ultrasound on your heart. Babies, when they're born, they have 2 holes in their heart. One closes immediately after birth, and the second one closes within a few days. His second hole was still opened, so they thought that was a reason why he was having trouble breathing. So they were looking into that, and I guess their technology wasn't strong enough, so they were considering taking him to Children's, transferring him to Children's Hospital, because he was still at the NICU at the hospital that I delivered at. And the whole time that this was happening, like I said, I was having complications with my C-section, and I guess one day, Juan and I had went out to eat, because the nurse was like, you need to get the fuck out, pretty much, you know, like, take care of yourself, which I should have done, because after we went out to eat and went home and got clothes and went back to the NICU, we were only gone for like 3 hours, went back to the NICU, I had severe shivers. Like, I was shaking, my jaw was shaking, everything. He's awake. And I wasn't even cold, I was just having a fucking heart attack. And they were like, are you okay? And I was like, yeah. And then the next day, Juan went to go get a haircut, and I still wasn't feeling very good at this point. Juan went to go get a haircut and like had to run a few errands, talk to his boss and stuff like that. And the entire time that he was gone for like 4 hours probably. I slept through that time. And I guess the nurses said that the baby was not screaming, but he was crying, and I didn't wake up from it. So they were just like, this isn't good. So when Juan came back, I didn't even realize that he had came back, because the way I was feeling, I guess I just slept through it. And when I woke up, Juan was standing over me with one of the nurse practitioners, and they were talking about me, and I was just like, what the fuck is going on? This is weird as shit. So the nurse was like, baby, you need to go. And I was like, why? I'm like, it's fine, I want to stay with my son. And she was like, the whole situation with the baby crying, I didn't wake up, and the fact that I don't look very good and stuff like that. So she took my temperature, and it was at 104 degrees. So I had that's really abnormal for an adult. That's not good. So my temperature was 104 degrees. I was like, what do you think I should do? Should I go home, or should I go to the emergency room, which was just downstairs? I could just go. And she was like, just go check at the emergency room, see where it's at. And I was like, okay. So I was like, come on, just go take me to the bathroom really quick, because my C-section obviously still hurt really bad. So he took me to the bathroom, and I was throwing up, dude, which was fucking so painful, because your stomach muscles, you know, and my incision was right below there. So I was throwing up, and then I was like, Juan, help me. And then he came in the bathroom, and I fucking like almost fainted on him. And I was just like, yeah, I have to go to the emergency room, let's go. So I go to the emergency room downstairs, still shaking, and they check my temperature, and it's at 105.5 now. They said that, and the guy was like kind of freaked out. He was like, oh shit. And I was so like I had such a bad fever that my face, you know when you're out in the sun for a long time and you get like those weird red kind of things, like the you know what I'm talking about? Like they're red and it's like white in between. It's like a pattern. I had that all over right here and then on my chest. So I had such a bad fever that it was like getting to the point where my body was freaking the fuck out, obviously. And they told me that it was not normal, and then they took me into to get like IVs. They had to put 2 IVs in me. They were filling me up with fluid. They were gonna give me a how do you say it? Vaginal ultrasound. They were gonna be a CT scan, like MRI, all that stuff. So I can only imagine how Juan felt. Like he didn't know whether to go upstairs with baby or stay downstairs with me. So it was just, I felt so bad for him. But I was talking to the girl and I was just like, oh yeah, I don't feel good. And she's like, yeah, it's insane because people say that they check their temperature when they're at home and it's like 105. And then they come here and they're like only at 101 degrees, which is still not good, but you know, it's not that bad. But people like you who have fevers this bad, if you would have went up a degree higher, you would have had a seizure. Like you would have been having seizures and stuff like that. And I was like, great. So they gave me the vaginal ultrasound, which was fucking painful because the thing is like this long, and obviously I just had a baby at a C-section, shoved it in me and it fucking hurt. Hold on, my baby's crying. So that was super painful. And then they gave me like the whole scan, everything like that, and the guy who had given me the guy who's in the emergency room, there was 2 people taking care of me, my IV on my right arm, put it in wrong, and when I bent my arm, like I don't know what happened, but it fucking started gushing blood when I was getting my scan, like gushing, like squirting blood, and it squirted blood on like the sheet and everything. The guy who was giving me the scan was like, oh my god. And he was just like, let's go ahead and clean that up. So he started cleaning me up and gave me the scan, and I went back. I was in the back in the emergency room bed for just a little bit, you know, because they were considering putting me back in like a room to take, like a patient to take care of me. And I was like, I don't want to be away from my son anymore. So they're just like, let's just see how it goes. And it turns out I had like a really bad bladder infection, and they didn't know if it was going on my kidneys because of the fact that I was already peeing blood because of my C-section. So usually when you have a bad or like a kidney infection, you'll pee blood or something, you know, so it was hard to tell. So they were just like, you need to be on this medication, don't skip it, take it. And I was like, okay. So I had to go home. They took me, I didn't want to be away from my son, but I had to go home. I rested for a night and then I went back the next day. And the nurses were like, you look, like, how are you feeling? You look a little bit better. And I was like, I feel a little bit better. Stayed there for another week with my boy. And then they still didn't know why they were having to move him up on oxygen because the meconium should have been cleared out by now. Even if it was, it wouldn't be on the rate of the oxygen that he was at, like how high he was on oxygen. So they're just like, we have to transfer him to Children's Hospital. And I was like, okay. So they transferred him to Children's. So they transferred him to Children's Hospital. And he was there for 2 weeks. And when they transported him to Children's, he was on 6 liters of oxygen, which is a lot of oxygen because the oxygen that he's on right now is like so significantly different. But he was on 6 liters, so that was really hard to see him like that. And they had like the tubes again, like all over him. They had to put the when we first got there, they had to put the feeding tube in like 4 different times because they could just not get it. And he was screaming, and that made me fucking cry because I could not see my kid like that, like doing that anymore, you know. But you know, after that, they were slowly weaning him off. The fact that he was breathing so fast, he had to be on a special diet, fortified diet, 22 cal at first, because he obviously wasn't gaining weight. He was actually losing it because at the rate he was breathing, he was burning too much calories. So they had him on a diet. Still, you know, couldn't breastfeed him, which was super hard. And obviously the fact that my body it started not making enough milk because I wasn't breastfeeding him, and I was pumping like every 2 hours. It just wasn't working. I need my child, you know. So they had him on a feeding tube again, and then they would take it out, and then I was able to breastfeed him, and they would put it back in because his breathing they would think that he would get better, and then he would just get bad again. At this point, he was doing, you know, better. They were slowly weaning him off. He was doing good for a little bit, and then they had to, he was doing good. They had to put him on the standing oxygen again, but then they put him on the wall oxygen, which is like such a big thing. Like it's amazing to see your child improve with their health. So they put him on the wall oxygen, and then I was able to start breastfeeding him. They took the feeding tubes out. It was awesome. My body started making like a shit ton of milk. My bitties were swollen. They fucking hurt. They would squirt milk when I was like in the shower. They'd be like fucking squirting milk. So even though it hurt really bad, it was like such a great thing to see, and I got to breastfeed my boy. But yeah, after that they started talking about discharge after all the time that I was there. I only left to come home like probably like not 3-4 times the entire stay that he was at Children's. They moved us to a bigger room that had like a bathroom and a private bathroom. And at Children's, if you've never known a child to be at Children's Hospital or been like a parent or someone that you just know, that stays there, they have everything dedicated to the parents also, which was amazing. They have rooms that you can rent out that have queen beds that you could stay in instead of just staying in your room. They have like a lounge area, like a eating room, a dining room. They have showers, all that good stuff. So it was awesome. But I stayed in there. They gave us a big room that had a folding, like a bed that you could pull out. Our own private bathroom, because they noticed I was staying there, and I would not leave my boy. I just couldn't. I had separation anxiety from him. Like, I just could not be away from him. It literally pained me. Just the fact that I felt like I was already missing out on so much of the beginning of his life. I just didn't want to leave him. And I was so scared of postpartum depression because I'm just being like honest. I've dealt with depression before, and I just knew for some reason when I got pregnant, I don't know if it was like my mentality changed because I knew I had to think of something more important, but because I dealt with like hardcore depression when I was in high school and before that. But then all of a sudden when I got pregnant, it was like weird. I don't know if it was like hormonal change, but I just wasn't sad anymore. I don't know what happened, but I just felt so much better about everything. And I was so scared that after I had him that I would get postpartum depression. But the thing is, I didn't even have time to get sad about it. Like, I just had so much stuff to worry about, my son's health and everything. So that was a big thing. But I was missing out on so much of his life in the beginning part, but then he started slowly getting better, and they were talking about discharge, and they told me that they would have to do a series of tests before he got to go home, and I was like, okay, the tests, that's fine. And what they told me that the test would be was that they would unplug him from his oxygen and see how long he could last without it, which fucking horrified me. I'm like, my son already can't breathe. He's on a good amount of oxygen already. Like, you're gonna unplug his oxygen, he can die. And they're like, obviously, like, they're not gonna kill my son. They're not gonna push him to the point where he's gonna die, But they took him off his oxygen, and I witnessed the first time that they did that test, and it was horrifying. My son was sleeping when they did it, just in case, like, if he's at home, and because they said he was probably gonna come home with oxygen, which I knew that he would. But they said that if he pulls it off and he's without oxygen for a while, or we're driving and the cord's folded in the car or something like that, from his oxygen tank. So I witnessed the whole process, and they unplugged his oxygen, and he was sleeping peacefully, like a baby sleep. And then all of a sudden he started waking up, and he started getting fussy, and then he started choking, and he started screaming like my poor son. And then when he would scream, obviously his lungs aren't strong enough, he would kind of pass out and then go back to bed and then wake up screaming again because he knew he couldn't fucking breathe. So he failed the first one. He failed the first test, and then days later they were just like, okay, let's see how it goes. We'll go ahead and test him again. And obviously seeing that, I was just like, fuck, I don't want to be here for that. Like, obviously, like, I would, but thank God they did. Not thank God, but I wasn't there for the second test because I had come home just to sleep with Juan, and you know, just to be home with him, because he obviously was working. He works nights and he has 2 jobs. My poor boyfriend, such a hard worker, but he has 2 jobs. Obviously because I couldn't work. Thank God he takes care of me. But I say that in the most like grateful way. I'm really, really grateful for him. But I went home when I was with him, and we were getting ready to, oh no, he was going to work that day. It was on a Thursday, and he was getting ready to go to work, and I was getting ready. I was eating with him, and I was gonna go back to the hospital because it's like an hour drive away from where we live. And I got a call from the hospital, and they're like, so we're talking about him going home today. And I was like, what? Like, fuck yes, like I gotta bring my son home. And I was like, Juan, like you have to call into work and we have to go right now. And he's like, what, why? And I was like, because we gotta bring our son home. So we go to the hospital, and they did the test, and he passed. They did the test again, he passed. Thank God, my son's such a trooper. And so they did a second test, was put him in the car seat, and the same thing, oxygen thing. They just yeah, so that was cool. But since he was coming home on oxygen, they had to bring in like an expert on that shit to teach us how to change his tanks and how to refill them and all that stuff. So we got like a little test like that, and we had to also watch videos and learn how to do his diet and stuff like that. My poor baby. So we got to bring him home that day. It was October 4th, and it was like literally like the second greatest fucking day of my life, because being in a hospital for 3 or more weeks is so hard, especially when you're there almost every day. And I had to be up every 3 hours for his feedings, and I also had to pump, and then I obviously wanted to hold him because I felt like I wasn't holding him enough because he was in a bed, you know. It's just so sad. When I was at Children's, I would walk down the halls to go see my son, and these babies, they break my heart, like literally it makes me so sad. These babies were just laying there by themselves, and I feel like in order to grow and to heal, you need love. And they were just there by themselves, and you know, they were different situations because they were in the, you know, respiratory part of it, and like the neonatal respiratory part, and they had like the tubes in their throat because they had a much harder case. I can only imagine being their parent. Like I can't even, just my son right now, seeing all that stuff. But you know, I would hold him and stuff like that, and then I just never got any sleep really, so that was really hard. It was a lot of stress, but we got to bring him home, and they showed us how to do all the oxygen like that next day. Juan went to work, and then they had to bring home the delivery man from the medical supply where he gets all his stuff. They came by, they installed his tank refiller. It's like, I don't know if you guys can see it. It's this thing right here. That thing, this thing. It refilled his oxygen tanks. So he did have to come home on oxygen. It fills him up. He has 2 tanks that he uses. They switch out. He has it's like the Freedom cord, which he's on right now because it's 25-foot long cord, which it's also really hard. So that's a different story, is to be like when we brought him home, how different it was, because I can't even go upstairs without having to switch everything, like the tubing and stuff like that. And replacing the stickers on his face. He's not actually using the stickers. I'll show you guys my son in a little bit. But taking him a bath is pretty hard because of the tubes. You don't want water going in the tube, you know. So but it's not super hard, but it's just different. We have to mourn the fact that we didn't get a normal delivery, like the normal experience, and it doesn't seem like it's a big deal, but it really is so different. We didn't have a normal situation where, you know, the perfect fantasy of just having a perfect baby, and he is perfect. Shit, but you know what I mean, like having, oh son, you need to stop that. Having a normal delivery and bringing him home and him being, you know, just a normal baby. And so that situation's a little tough, but you know, he's such a good little one. He is. But we brought him home. He's healthy. He's only by the time he got home, he was on 1/8, but that wasn't enough for him. His nose would turn blue and his lips would turn blue, which was terrifying. So they moved him up to 1/4, and I told him that at night when he sleeps, you breathe differently when you sleep. You're more relaxed, so you breathe slower. So he's still not getting enough oxygen. His nose would turn blue and his lips would turn blue. So they told me that I could move him up when he sleeps, so he's at 1/2 a tank, or 1/2 a tank of oxygen when he sleeps. But he's doing really good, my little sweetie. We're at home. We've been at home. I'm recording this on November 2nd or 1st. I can't remember. I'm such a mom, but around that time, right? And then I'll upload this in a couple of days. But yeah, we're home. It's really hard sometimes because like our world kind of revolves around doctor's appointments. The first week that he was home, from Monday to Friday, he had 4 doctor's appointments, different locations from his primary care physician, and I'm going to an hour drive to Children's for his pulmonologist, and then going to Longmont for his medical supplies. So I'm just a busy bee, you know, on top of having stuff at home like laundry, keeping it clean, feeding my boyfriend, packing his lunches for work, pumping, you know, just all that stuff. Showering is really hard. Like, it's fucking, in all reality, sometimes I forget when I do. I'm just like, when did I last shower? But it was pretty tough at first. But now I'm starting to get a little used to it. So it's not as bad, but it's still like our world surrounds just like that stuff. And then the next week after that, so 2 weeks after he got out from the hospital, he had 3 doctor's appointments that week. So that was tough. So it's been a different experience since we've been home, but it's also been awesome because I spent every waking moment with my son, literally, like every waking moment. Since he was still on his diet, I had a bottle feed still with my breast milk and formula. So, but now I'm like slowly using only breast milk. So I'm only breastfeeding during the days, and then during at nights I'm mainly breastfeeding, and then during the days I'll bottle feed him his diet plan. But we're good. We're just at home. He doesn't have. But the thing is, that thing that sucks is at this point he's still on oxygen. His nose will still turn blue, but the meconium should have been cleared out. It's not his heart that is the issue anymore, because the second hole in his heart is still open. But they don't know why he's on oxygen, so that's a really aggravating thing. It really is fucking frustrating, the fact that they still don't know why he's on oxygen. He has like 3 pulmonologist doctors now. He's still on oxygen. It's really tough to not have any answers why now at this point, but knowing he still needs it. I don't know if it's like something that can affect him long term, or the fact that it's just like they said that 10% of children will need oxygen in the first year of their life. I just hope it's not that long, but if he needs it, he needs it. I'm not going to push for something, for him to be rushed. I want him to heal properly and for them to give him what he needs, so he can get better and so he can get off the oxygen. And so it's just really frustrating at this point. They don't know why he's on oxygen. We have more doctor's visits. It's just a waiting game at this point. It's really tough, but it's getting easier. But okay, so his name is Atlas Blue. Reasons for the maps and stuff like that. Atlas Blue Vargas. He took his dad's last name. He was born on September 16th, 2018. He weighed 8 pounds, which he was a pretty big baby. Fuck, if I waited that long, I would have waited that long. Full term, 40 weeks. I don't know if I'm gonna make it. 8 pounds and 20 inches. He's falling asleep. But I'm gonna go ahead and introduce the world to my son. This is Baby Blue. His cousins call him Baby Blue. He doesn't have the stickers because clearly you can see it's starting to tear his skin. So we're taking a break from that, but this is Baby Blue. He's tired. He's like, Mom, stop. That's a bright light. This is my little son. He's doing much better. He looks identical to his papa. This is him. My little baby. He's gorgeous, huh? Look at him. He had so much hair. They say that babies on oxygen tend to lose a lot of hair. More hair compared to the average baby, which they'll lose hair if they have hair. But there was no separation between his eyebrow and his hairline, but now he's starting to bald because of the oxygen. Obviously you can see he had hair all the way down there, but he's starting to lose it. And, you know, it doesn't matter. He still has a head full of hair. My little son. I love this kid. But I hope you guys liked this video. Please subscribe to my channel. Like this video. Go watch my previous videos. And then more will come, guys. It's just that life has been crazy, obviously. My pregnancy was a wreck. My labor and delivery was a wreck. Being a new mom has been different, but it's been amazing. So yeah, but my future videos will be like mommy based. I'll show you guys the process of like him taking baths. I'll show you how I do everything, how I change his tanks, and all that stuff. So yeah, I'll keep you guys updated. All right, say bye, Atlas. Say bye, Baby Blue. All right, bye, guys.